Chris Hutchins, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
2 exits to giant companies. I want to hear about both, but I think we agreed off mic that we'd sort of dig into Grove. So talk about Grove. Like, give me the founder story. How did this thing come about?
So it's funny how what I do today has probably made me reconsider what I will say. But when it started, it felt like I was starting me as a company. And I think a lot of our investors would agree. I am a financial optimizer. That's like at my core what I love to do. And I was struggling with the fact that so many of my friends were asking for financial advice and just had no clue what they should be doing. And many of them were in great financial positions, but they didn't have any confidence. And so I was trying to figure out, this is about, let's call it a decade ago, like what tool service could relieve that stress and anxiety? Because, money is the number one cause of divorce. It's the number one cause of stress. Like, how do you fix that problem? Primarily for the like Gen X, Gen Y generation. And what I learned in a lot of research was that people who go through the process of financial planning, which usually looks like working with a human financial advisor to kind of outline all of their assets, how much they spend and all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, have a model that tells them like, are they on track? Are they doing the right thing? And what's in their blinders and all that. Those people felt really good about their finances. Almost everyone else did not, unless they had so much money that they just kind of knew they were okay. But even those people often didn't feel good. So we thought, how do we make
they were trying to answer the question like, am I tracking towards a successful retirement? Am I saving
effectively, it's like, am I okay?
Am I okay?
Here's my expectation for life. Yep. How does my expectation for the rest of my life line up with my current financial situation? Both like balance sheet, how am I doing today? And income statement, how much am I saving and making each year? And nobody knew how to answer that question. Even people who knew how much money they had and knew how much money they saved each year had no idea how to answer that question. And there were tools that you could use to do this. But, I always say that financial advisors are just as much financial experts as therapists, because like sometimes it's just having a person to talk to about it. But what we realized in the moment was the software at the time was so bad that, advisors were taking 20, 30, 40 hours to run these simulations, collect data from consumers like on real physical pieces of paper, collecting it through an interview instead of the internet. And so what if we paired human financial advisors with software that ran the financial planning process of collecting information, running simulations, and offered it at a fraction of the cost of traditional financial planning, which at the time probably would cost you $3,000 to $5,000 a year. And we could do it for, $600 to $900 a year. And that was the thesis.
So you built the software?
So we built a little of the software, and then we realized quickly that the challenge of that industry was a customer acquisition challenge. And so, I always think when I'm building companies, like what are the known knowns and what are the known unknowns? And I think the known was that we could build the software. Like we knew we could build the software. We didn't know if we could get 10,000 people to use the product and the service, but we knew the software, like we knew how to do it. And in a way, when you're running a company, if you're faced with 2 things, one of which you know how to do but haven't done, and one of which, you don't know if will work, and you've raised some investor capital or put in your own money such that you can afford to not solve the known problem, you should go tackle the thing you don't know how to do. So we built just enough software that the experience we offered matched the experience that would ultimately be offered if we built the full suite of software. And then we focused all our time on trying to figure out how to grow and scale and acquire customers, which is where we realized the business didn't work.
The customer being the financial advisor or the customer being...
So hiring and recruiting financial advisors was actually pretty easy because their entire career options was working at these kind of stodgy old firms at the time. And so they loved the idea of coming to work at like a young, fun tech company. They'd have some ownership and all that. Recruiting consumers seemed like it was easy in the early days. So in the first year or two of the business, we had a wait list that people would pay to be on. But what was evident eventually was that there was some latent demand of people who decided they wanted financial planning and were just waiting for a good solution. Beyond that, 1 to 2,000 people, was a bunch of people who didn't know they needed this or knew they needed it, but weren't excited to have it. So the question became, how do you find someone who doesn't want your product today? How do you get in front of them and convince them that now is the time they want it? And so we found this funny thing where we invited people off the wait list and we said, hey, you've paid to be on this wait list. We are ready for you to use this product. And half of them said, I'm not ready. This is not something I want to do right now. So we said, I'm really sorry. That's fine. We'll send you a refund. They're like, no. I don't want a refund. I want to do this. I just don't want to do it right now. And, almost a year went by and nobody was ever ready. Like some people were, but like they knew they wanted to do it, but they weren't ready to do it now. And so when we tried to acquire customers without a wait list, we said, like, get started now. And all of a sudden it was so difficult to acquire customers because at the end of the day, you look at your financial tasks or you look at your life tasks, many of them have to be solved now. Like, oh, I've got kids. I got to figure out, how to get what school they're going to go to because there's a date at which they go to school, right? Like, we just had a kid and we need to buy a home. We need another room. Like we have to solve it. Even your taxes, like I am going to face penalties and fees if I do not send money to the IRS by April 15th and then ultimately file the document by October 15th. Like there are set deadlines in life. There are no deadlines with financial planning. Nobody's going to say if you're not on track today, it matters. And so everyone would just kick the can down the road. Occasionally someone would say, gosh, we want to buy a house. We don't know how much we can afford. That's an inflection point. But the process of financial planning is a big process. And even those people were like, well, but I don't really need to figure out retirement. I just need to know how much home I can afford. And they even sometimes weren't willing to do that.
Hey, it's John. Look, if you're building to sell, I want to let you know about a resource you may find helpful. It's called the Value Builder Score, and it will evaluate your company in the same way that acquirers will look at your business. It'll give you a score on the 8 factors that drive the value of your company. You'll also get an estimate of value and things you could do to improve that value over time. Whether you want to sell now or in a decade from now, knowing how the movie ends, I think puts you in the catbird's seat, gives you all kinds of negotiating leverage. So it's available exclusively through a Value Builder advisor. So talk to your advisor. If you don't have one yet, you can go to valuebuilder.com/score. Let us know what industry you're in, and we will connect you with an advisor who specializes in companies like yours. Just go to valuebuilder.com/score. So what'd you do? So what'd you do? Like you have all these people who are
the cost to acquire a customer was more than they would pay us. And
right.
So we this was probably 3 years in the making, right? Early on, we didn't have the capacity to bring on enough people. So early on, we thought this totally works. We have capacity for 100 clients. We reach out, we get 100 clients, no problem. Getting to 1,000 was easy. The most important thing was, can we go from 1,000 to 10,000? And when we tried to go from 1,000 to 10,000 clients, everything broke. No means of acquiring customers. We offered the product for free. We said, you can use this for free. You can use it for $20. You can use it for $1,000. Let's make it super premium. You can use it for $10,000. No matter what we charged, no matter how we packaged it, no matter where we marketed it on Facebook ads, we had an intern standing outside of a couple startup offices while they were going through an IPO, handing out flyers. Like, surely people who work at companies going through, an IPO and are going to make money are in our target demo. And it was still so difficult.
Wow.
So people that used it loved it.
Right.
NPS through the roof. Everyone was so ecstatic, but getting people over that hurdle was so impossible that we kind of faced a point where we said, well, we've raised $10 million. We still have $5 million left. Is it prudent to continue paying a team of 20 people when we know that we don't have a way to grow this business profitably? And the answer ended up being no.
And so, okay, so let's that's super clear. So you had 20 employees, you'd raised $10 million of capital from VCs, presumably, or
from venture capitalists.
Yeah. You spent $5 million. hiring the interns and giving out flyers and stuff like that. And then you had 5 in the bank.
Yep. And those numbers are like rough. Maybe we had 4 in the bank, but roughly we'd spent half or a little more than half of our money, and we were faced with the core assumption of the product we want to build. It doesn't work at scale. And when you raise venture capital money, like it has to work at scale. You can't just run a bootstrap business. So like we were kind of in a bit of a pickle.
Mm-hmm. Because a single's not good for them, right? Like a nice little lifestyle business with some profits is not really what they're looking for.
Yeah. And it wasn't what we set out to build. And it would be a very different business. So we had 2 choices. Do we take the team we had or some portion of the team we have and the money we have and try something new? Or do we try to see if everything we built and learned would be valuable to another company?
I want to get to the fork in the road that you got to, but just walk me through some of the emotions. Like you seem very sanguine, very like low key about the whole thing, but it can't have been that easy to have this big thesis, having come from another exit where you and just failing again and again and again. What was that like?
It's funny. I feel like I really enjoy rapid experimentation. And so it's like, oh, it doesn't work. Well, like, okay. Like I'm probably, my wife would tell you that I'm probably not, emotionally invested as a normal person in a lot of things. So for me, I was like, I really wanted this to work. We made a list of all the things we needed to try to determine whether it would work, and they didn't work. So like, I think the fact that I was willing to not keep pushing is probably, why I never have built $1 billion company. I think there is this element of just unrelenting passion and force of nature to just drive the thing home. And like, I didn't think that we had an outcome. There are other people in my shoes who might have said, I don't care. I'm going to find a way. I felt like we tried all the ways, and like the most rational, prudent thing to do as a, investor, shareholder, stakeholder, everything was to kind of find a better outcome for the company than keep trying. But, I've now seen 12 to 15 entrepreneurs pitch me effectively the exact same business we ran. And like one of them might figure it out. My advice to them is don't build anything, figure out how to acquire customers, because that's all that matters in this industry. And 9 out of 10 of them are going to learn that lesson the hard way and build the software first or build the app first or something. But it is a very tough space. And I think the biggest piece of advice I can give anyone is try to find that thing that's going to break your company as you take it to the next level, and relentlessly focus on that thing. Forget about whether you can shave 10% off here or fix this thing. If you know you can do it, push it aside and try to figure out the thing that you don't know if you can do. Because in our case, we couldn't do it. And like had we spent a year and millions of dollars to build the software and then figured it out, we would have been in the exact same position, but with no money.
Yeah. But here you are at this fork in the road. So one option is to spend the rest of the cash, right? You still got $4 or $5 million bucks. Let's go try something else, right? A second option you're exploring is, would what we built, because there was a straw man there, will be valuable to someone else? Am I getting the 2 options you consider?
Yep. It was we have a combination of customers, product, maybe you could call it brand, and employees that I think are valuable, in parts or whole to other companies. So maybe we'll come back to that one and go to the first one, which was, or we could build something new. And the challenge was, you will not succeed building a company if you aren't passionate about what you are doing. So it's like, sure, we could come up with ideas, but like I didn't have a thing that I wanted to go build. And so to start a company solely for the purpose, like if I'd gone to my investors and said, I'd love to raise $5 million to build something, I have no idea what it is. Like they'd be like, what are you doing? Like you have no idea. So we did spend some cycles trying to see, okay, what are we excited about? We also realized that like the team we had built was specifically for this challenge. So we had like 12 financial planners, right? Like what does that look like? If the new version of what we build doesn't need financial planners, what does that look like? My co-founder at the company, who, he and I had kind of pretty close to equal ownership, had a finance background. He was an engineer. So like there are a lot of things we could have built, but if we said, let's go build a mobile app to manage your credit card rewards, the team of 20, maybe three or four of them or five of them might have made sense. And the other, 70, 80% of the team didn't make sense. And then you had to ask yourself, okay, we have a company where we've sold X% of the company for $10 million. And, these employees all own some percentage of it. If the idea is to take three people and go try something new, is that the framework you want? Or is it better to wind this company down, return as much capital as you can, do everything you can to find a good home for the team, and then go find the idea, go, build the thing and start from scratch with this new thing that we didn't even know what it was. And so it was like, even the idea of keeping going didn't necessarily make sense in the framework of what we had, the legal entity, the employees, the capital.
But how did you kind of stick handle the obligation or the guilt associated with you'd recruited these financial planners who were, probably well employed in their other jobs. You'd given them equity or options. You had a co-founder. So you've done a lot of convincing along the way. You've convinced investors to like back your vision. So here you are at this fork in the road. Was part of like the calculus here just like a sense of guilt? Like, am I really going to not?
I think that was the biggest thing I would say, the fortunate thing about financial planning is as much as it is an ongoing relationship, the biggest inflection point is once you've delivered the first financial plan, you've kind of given people a path. So like, I would say above, in general, my priority was customers, employees, but because once we've delivered this product and service in the first iteration to the customers, they were kind of like, oh my gosh, I now know what I need to do. I have a plan going forward. So I felt like if they lost access to the product, it would suck, but like a tremendous amount of the value of the product they had. So to me, the most important thing was we just convinced 17 people to quit their jobs and like come work at this company. Yeah. And like, what are we going to do? And so,
did that weigh on you? Like,
personally? Oh, totally. That was like the most important factor was like, how do we find a home that people want? Or how do we help them, look for jobs? How do we make sure we have enough money? I mean, how do we make sure we give them enough severance if they need time to go find something? And so when we started thinking about what have we built and what value could it have to another company, the primary thing we had built was a really incredible team of 20 people. So what other companies might be interested? I think a lot of the IP we had was stuff that could be recreated. It was like product ideas and that kind of stuff. So the real thing was we had a lot of customers and we had these employees, and what could we do with that? And so we ran a process, like a very regimented process for finding an acquirer for the company.
Okay, so I want to get into that, but first, just give me the number. So you're at ballpark 20 employees. How many customers do you have, ballpark?
Probably about 1,000 at the time, if I had to guess. I can't remember exactly.
Okay, and to be clear, it's not a transactional model. So a customer becomes a customer, and they would have access. They would get a financial plan, but they would have access to that forever. Like they could log in and relook at it and make changes.
Yeah, I mean, if the website never exists, like what do they do? Do we find a way to export it so they have access to it? That kind of thing. But the idea was they had this plan and they had access to an advisor and they signed up for a year. And so, the immediate thing was if we have to shut this company down, do we feel like we can do right by the customers with some combination of refunds and exporting their plan and giving them access to all their data? It felt really good, like we could. It felt like if we were going to shut down, we should find a firm that, offers a product close enough to what we have and vet it and be able to say, if you still want ongoing financial planning support, we have found a place that you can go, and maybe they're willing to offer you a special deal or like make a smooth transition or something like that. So like we felt good about a customer plan. That was not weighing on me as much as the employee plan.
Super helpful. So you're at this kind of fork in the road and you're like, you make the decision to go run a process to try to sell, quote unquote, these assets, which is basically a team and some customers and a product that has IP, but you're not profitable. Like you wouldn't look at a P&L and say, oh, multiple of EBITDA. Like that's not the situation.
Yeah. No one cared at all about the profit of the business. I mean, I think they cared a little bit, like if we were going to acquire this business, it has cash in the bank. So like that was relevant, But so like the balance sheet was relevant. The income statement was like they might want to know what is everybody getting paid.
Yeah.
But the income
what would
side,
the P&L have looked like?
Yeah, I mean, we just lose this much money each month.
Right, like hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, tens of thousands.
Honestly, I'm just trying to back into the math. I was like, we ran the company for 4 years. We spent, let's call it $5 million. Like, you spent less in the beginning, more in the end. So like slightly over
$1 million a year, maybe $100,000 a month.
Yeah, like something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Let's say 150 grand a month.
Okay. We're throwing these numbers out like they're nothing. $100,000 a month. We're losing, but that's a lot of money that's a huge amount of money, obviously. Okay. So you're at this fork in the road. That's super interesting. And you're running a process. So walk me through the process. First of all, what are the VCs saying at this point? Like, are they on board and saying, yeah, you should run a process? Or are they like, give me my money back? I'll take 10 cents on the dollar.
Well, I think assuming you can run a fast process, I think they're more interested. Every VC is investing for the purpose of, seeing a multiple.
Sure.
So, there's 0% chance that getting, 50, or probably by the time it's done, let's call it like 30 cents on the dollar, is going to do anything for them. But there is a chance that you could get acquired by someone that would pay back investors and all this kind of stuff. So like that, they're very open to that process. I think we did a good job of communicating, but there's always going to be one person that thinks you didn't. But like for the most part, the feedback we got was very supportive. Like, we want to make sure everyone lands on their feet. We want to make sure we want to make sure this all works. And assuming an investor likes you and thinks you're talented, their end goal is like, okay, this was a loss, but I want to make sure that if you do it again and you're going to win, like, we want to be able to back you again. So like all of our investors were very supportive of, let's find the best outcome here, given the circumstance. And, if my heart is not in trying to make this work, what are they going to do? Force me to work on a thing? Like, it's never going to be successful. If I don't think it's going to be successful, there's no point in doing that. So they were very supportive of the process. They're like, who do you need to know? What can you do? I made a list of probably 60 companies that I was like, these 60 companies would potentially be interested. Everything from like Chase, Vanguard, Fidelity to other big financial, companies like, Wealthfront, Betterment, Chime, Credit Karma, SoFi, all the way down to startups that maybe were just getting started and didn't have a team. And for this, it would be like, wow, we could really accelerate what they're doing. And I made this giant list of all of them, reached out to all of them. I had a pretty good network from being a venture capitalist before, asked some of our investors, hey, we're going through this. Who should we talk to? And tried to run that process as quickly as possible, because like fundraising, momentum is everything. And so the last thing you want to be is desperate in this process. And the more potential, suitors in the thing, the better it would run. And so we went through the process of talking to everyone. And I would say 50% of the time it was immediate no. 40% of the time it was like, well, I'd say 50% no, 20% let's have another conversation, and 30% like, we're interested, but it was very clear that it's an old school big financial firm, and the time it's going to take them to do something like this would be so astronomically long that it was not going to go anywhere. So we probably ended up with 4 of 50 that seemed like there was some potential there. And we made it very clear, like, if this isn't going to happen in the next couple months, like, it's fine, but let's not, my negotiation style is like, things are moving quickly. If you're not interested, no worries. Like, I want to give you an out, because so many people don't want an out. They just want to like lead you on, so they never have to be the one that says no. Like, they don't want to be, they hate, no one likes rejecting someone else. So I made it easy. I'm like, things are moving quick. If you're not interested, let me know. And they're like, oh, thanks. No, not interested. Like, people who, were clearly not interested but wouldn't tell me, wrote back to that email in 2 minutes. And they're like, oh, good luck. Glad things are moving quick. Because the best thing you can do when you're trying to sell a company is not spend your time with someone who's never going to buy your company. So the easier you can make it for someone else to say no, the more you're going to spend time with people who might say yes.
And you learned that the hard way?
No, I don't. I think I'd learned that the hard way raising money from VCs in previous lives or previous companies where it's like, someone's like, I'm really interested. I like what you're doing. And like, they just lead you along because they never want to tell you no, because a lot of investors are afraid that if they say no, you'll hate them. And then the next time, if things are going well, they won't be able to invest in the next round and all that stuff. The best investors are really good at just honestly telling you, hey, this isn't a good fit for us right now. Here's why. And they do it in a really nice way.
Got it. So you're getting some interest, 3 or 4 people saying, yeah, we should like dig in a little bit. Walk me through the pitch. I mean, did you reveal that like we're struggling and we want to find a home, or like what was the opening pitch?
I think the opening pitch was not that, right? The opening pitch was, we have this thing that works and customer acquisition is hard. And if you have a company with massive customer acquisition abilities and your marketing's great, and right, like a way to approach this, every founder likes to feel like they're amazing. So it's like, you guys have clearly solved customer acquisition. We have this thing that people love. NPS score is high. It's wildly profitable if you can only solve customer acquisition. And like, of course, you know what you're doing here. You guys have grown so much. The only way for them to kind of say they don't want to buy your company is to admit that they don't know how to grow, which they would never want to do. So that was the opening pitch. And then pretty quickly, you get to the point that it's like, is this company interested in a deal that values what you built at more than just the people? And if not, then you're talking about acqui-hire. And if so, you're talking about an acquisition. And one of the deals was more like, we want to hire your team to build what you've built here. And we want to set up milestones and checkpoints where if you hit these goals and these metrics, you'd make a lot more money, all of course, in the form of equity in that company. And so, I flew to where their headquarters was multiple times. We had lots of conversations. And that was much more, we're going to hire you and acquire your company, and your investors will get shares in this company. And you're going to kind of try to build something similar, not exactly, but similar to what you've been building with your team and your advisors here. So that was one. One was another startup that it was kind of clear this wasn't going to go anywhere. One was a much bigger old school financial institution that it was kind of clear was not going to move fast enough. And then one was where we ended up going, which was Wealthfront, which was very clear from the get-go. We have no interest in having human financial advisors work at our company. Like we have one role where they could be doing things that are similar to financial advice, but we do not want to build a human advisor component. And we'd kind of decided in the exploration of what do we build next, that if we were going to build anything new, we would build it without humans in the loop. Like we kind of like, I think there is a role for them, but I don't know if there's a role for them in a scalable, software company. Mm-hmm. And so Wealthfront, the CEO, Andy, was very clear. He's like, to us, this is about hiring you and a product and engineering team and maybe a few financial advisors to come and do what we're doing. We don't want your clients. We don't want, your assets. We don't want any of the other things you have. That's not interesting to us.
And what was your reaction to those two? Sounds like you had two potential, like that had some meat on the bone, right? Like, were you the first and the fourth offer? Were those the two that you were kind of thinking about?
Yeah. So it was very clear that those are the two options. It was this other company and Wealthfront. We played out both of them at the same time. I think our investors and most of us were probably more interested in the other opportunity because it was an actual acquisition. Investors might get either made whole or get an amount of stock. But at the end of the day, and the Wealthfront one didn't necessarily want the team of financial advisors. So concurrently, we ran a separate process talking to companies that we thought could be a good home for our clients. And we found a company that was very interested in, being a home for the clients or another alternative option, and was scaling their advisor team. And so it kind of became clear that one path was clients and financial planners could have an opportunity at one place, and, software product engineering founding team would have a home at the other place. And the other was everyone would go. But ultimately, that company had a bunch of things happening internally. And, using the kind of tactic I mentioned earlier, it was like, is this really going to happen in any reasonable amount of time? And we kind of forced their hand and they were like, no, it's not. Like, there are other priorities at our company that are going to take over the time for the next 3 months. And if you're willing to wait, we can talk. And Wealthfront was like, if we're going to do this, we need to do it. And it didn't make sense to wait for a maybe when we had something that was maybe less of a financially good outcome for everyone, but seemed like it was going to happen. And so we kind of really seriously considered that. We said, okay, all of our engineers, products, design, they all interviewed at Wealthfront. A few of the financial planners who were interested in the role they had at Wealthfront interviewed. And then the financial advisors and planners who were interested in the other company, a company called Facet Wealth. That company interviewed the financial planning team. And some people opted out of the whole thing. They said, actually, I want to go do a different thing. So this is, thank you. And, we offered everyone, here's your computer, you can keep it, because what were we going to do with it? We gave us, we made sure people, had a nice package to go home if they didn't take one of these jobs. And I think 5 of us went to Wealthfront. 4 or 5 people went on to Facet, maybe 3. I can't remember the exact numbers. And everyone else ended up doing something else and found a job. And, for everyone that I stay in touch with, like everyone seemed to land on their feet and do something interesting.
So interesting. So the Wealthfront deal was, I want the engineering team, I want the product team, designers, to come in, but they didn't want the IP of the product itself.
Not at all. Yeah. The thing is that it was a weird transaction because they actually wanted our office, which was great because we had like a 3-year lease on an office and we were 1 year into it. And Wealthfront was interested in having a San Francisco office. So they took this like giant liability off the plate of the company, which was awesome. They needed all the furniture.
Guarantee that lease?
I think the company guaranteed it, but the company had assets in the bank. So we kind of have to figure that out. So the transaction ended up looking like Wealthfront hired 5 people, took over the lease, bought all the furniture and, the monitors and chairs and all the stuff in the office. And then the investors of Wealthfront had the option to receive something like 35 cents on the dollar or take 35 cents on the dollar and invest in Wealthfront at the, kind of current price. They weren't raising financing right then, but like at an effective price that, of where the company was at the time.
You mentioned the investors in Wealthfront. I think you meant to say the investors in Grove.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. The investors of Grove could become investors in Wealthfront with their 30 cents on the dollar or 35 cents on the dollar, and kind of invest in that company. So it was as if Wealthfront bought, the shares. But instead of that, that would be way more complicated because then they'd have to buy the company and it'd be it'd just be way more legal and headache. So the company just wound down and dissolved. And Wealthfront hired people, took over a lease, bought some furniture, and raised some money from investors in a way that we were able to just kind of like invest the money for them at their direction to kind of make it simpler. So not every investor took that option.
Okay, so to be clear though, the investors in Grove, they were given like 35 cents on the dollar worth of equity in Wealthfront. They
were given 35 cents on the dollar, and they got to choose whether we put that money into their bank account or we put that money into Wealthfront's bank account, where they would get if somebody invested 100,000 and they were going to get 35,000, they could either get 35,000 or invest 35,000 in Wealthfront.
Got it. And what do they choose to do?
I would say probably 60-70% of the investors and maybe like 85-90% of the dollars went to Wealthfront, but a couple of the investors decided not to. I think it was really dependent on the state of the fund, right? Would that money, investors usually raise a fund and then they set aside some money for follow-on capital in companies that raise future rounds. Did some of those investors need those funds for other things? Or were they more interested in taking a swing on Wealthfront and seeing what happens? No one hurt my feelings by making a decision one way or the other. It was purely, we have this option for you. If you want it, great. If you don't, that's totally fine.
What's your state of mind at this point when you're starting to realize there's no giant payday for Grove, that we're going to get some money out of this, trying to do well by our employees? Like, what's your headspace like at this stage?
I think we'd presented almost every single person with a job they could interview for if they were interested. Many people, for different reasons, decided they didn't even want to interview. Like, I think 10 people were offered interviews at Wealthfront and only 6 of them wanted to interview. Some of them were like, well, I don't know if I want to commute. Some of them didn't like the programming language Wealthfront used. Like, there were all kinds of reasons. So I feel like knowing that, everyone, not everyone, because like maybe some people didn't fit in, including my co-founder, but knowing that most people had an opportunity to interview at a company, and not be unemployed, like most people had that option, felt great. Like that was, we found a home for customers. We found a home for employees. We had enough money to do right by the employees that, even if they chose not to interview, it's not like we gave them a week's pay and said, see you later. So I felt like that was a huge weight off my shoulders, and our investors weren't upset. I think there was some drama with one investor who, like there's only so much you can force someone to read emails and stuff. So if you tell someone what's going on and someone doesn't understand them or read them and then gets caught off guard that this whole process is happening and they weren't able to opine on it, but you gave them ample time to and they chose not to, like you can't control the drama comes of that situation. But I certainly don't feel bad that, we tried to over communicate and that communication didn't, I felt bad that they felt that way, but like we tried to do the right thing. And I think we did the right thing. We didn't even try. We did. So at that point I was like, what do I want to do? Our investors were very, very, very insistent that like I should not take any deal so that they or even other employees have a better outcome. Like, don't go take a job you don't want so that we get some extra capital. So if I hated Wells Fargo and never wanted to work there, but they offered us $10 million and could make the investors whole, our investors would have, at least almost all of them, and definitely our lead investors would have said, don't take a deal that requires you to work at Wells Fargo for 4 years to make us money. Like we want you to do something next that you're excited about. Fortunately, the CEO of Wealthfront was awesome. And, I was very excited to work there. So I was like, this is great. Like we created a new role. I was really excited to do it. I was going to get to work with some of the team that, I had just hired, which was awesome. And so I was kind of excited. Obviously, I had to manage a lot of the process. And I think it was a bummer that there was no role for my co-founder at Wealthfront or that he would want at Facet. So that wasn't great, but we had kind of gone into this whole process eyes wide open about what the options were. And it's not like I chose an option that he wasn't a part of when there was an option he was. Like it was don't do this thing that helps me and doesn't help him so that neither one of us have a job. So like he got it and we found, I think it ended up being a good outcome for everyone.
And
he's now doing machine learning research at Stanford, doing all kinds of cool stuff. So
he's great. Did you need a job? Like, did you need to kind of pay bills at this point in
the previous acquisition, which we didn't talk about at all, was not too dissimilar of a story. To really narrow it down, it was like we had 7 people working on a mobile app that didn't work, and we realized we didn't know what we wanted to build next. And so we talked to Facebook and Google and, said, do either of you want to hire our team? And they did. And, anytime you're doing either of these things, the outcome is often, not something you don't get a huge payday up front. But I worked at Google for 4 years and you get paid well to work at Google. And I had done all right. And so I'd saved enough money that I wasn't like, I wasn't financially independent where I could just live in San Francisco forever and do whatever I wanted. But I wanted something to do. Like sure. I was still excited to go build stuff. And, Wealthfront, even today, like it's a really interesting opportunity to go after the same demographic we were serving with something that they'd been testing and working on for almost a decade that worked. So like, could I take everything I learned about that customer and building software for them and apply it differently? And it was awesome. Like when I joined, I remember people were like, how long do you have to stay there? And I was like, I could stay here for the rest of my life. Like I genuinely felt like I would never need to look for anything else.
But you did eventually move on. Like what did you move on? When did you move on? What triggered that?
So I think about like 3 years in, I'd always enjoyed podcasting as a medium, and I'd only ever done it as a guest. But I'd started 6 blogs and never got past like 3 posts. I'd tried my hand at like posting on social media, and it was just never for me. But being a guest on a podcast felt so natural, and I had all these like ideas and thoughts of things. I thought like, it wasn't early, but it wasn't where podcasting is today 4 years ago. So I had a couple ideas and was talking to a friend, and he's like, you should just start a podcast, see what happens. And so I had no intent of it being anything that I would like it is today. I offered Wealthfront to own it. I was like, just can you carve out 20% of my time to do this thing? It's going to go after a demographic you guys care about. Maybe that would work. And they said, no, we don't want to own a podcast. Let's carve out that you own the podcast and you can work on it on your own free time. And so I was like, okay. So we made 8 episodes and people just loved it, like to the point that it was very clear that we had a there. And, I kept doing it on the side for probably 18 months because I think the real reason is like I was scared to give up a steady paycheck to go work on something else. And even when that thing started making money, scared is maybe the wrong word. Maybe I was too greedy, but it was like, I'm able to do this thing that makes money and this job. Like, so even though I could replace my salary, right now I effectively had 2 salaries. But it got to the point where I realized that if a friend of mine had come to me and said, hey, I'm working on this thing on the side, I have all these ideas for what it could turn into, should I leave? I would have told that friend that they should take that leap and quit their job and go do that thing. And so, I was like, after thinking about it from that perspective of what advice would I give my friend if they were in my shoes, I was like, I think I have to leave and see what this can turn into.
And the podcast is called All the Hacks. And
yes.
Everybody should have a listen to that. I want to ask you about All the Hacks in a moment. Before we, though, finish up on your story, I just wanted to ask about Facet. Facet, as I understand it, was the second company where you did a process to identify a company that would be interested in the financial planners as well as the customers.
Yep.
How did you get compensated for that? Or what kind of deal did you work out?
Yeah, I think the deal we worked out with them was effectively like they hired employees. That was just, they could hire people. We were doing that not for profit. We're trying to find a home for employees, and many of them still work there today. And I think we said, look, we have this list of customers. We came up with a reasonable amount of money. Like the first step was, do we think you offer a service that would be valuable? Like, it wasn't like, who's the highest bidder for our customer list?
Sure.
It was, first, let's find a company. And if we couldn't, we wouldn't have done anything. But like, we felt like they genuinely could serve our customers in a way that was consistent with what we wanted and we valued, using CFPs, acting as fiduciaries, all that kind of stuff. And then we said, what's a good value to you for having effectively, let's call it 1,000 very qualified leads in that they were customers, and let's call it 50,000 people on a waiting list or a newsletter, or like 50,000 emails that were not warm. And we kind of agreed, okay, here's what we'll do for all our customers. We'll send them an email that says, here's the company we partnered with. We would let them opt out of receiving any information from Facet. Facet would limit the number of outreaches to people who didn't opt out to 2 emails. We would offer them to schedule a phone call and come up with a link to do it. So like, we made a smooth transition that wouldn't give Facet the ability to email them for the rest of their lives. And kind of came up with a price for that was probably somewhere in the like $50,000 to $100,000 range.
Got it.
Like, it was not a huge financial outcome, but we were like, what's a reasonable price to pay for really warm leads? We knew what the customer acquisition cost was in this industry. Like, what is that worth? And, we negotiated it and came up with something.
I'm so grateful for you sharing your story, because I think there's a lot of our listeners. I was doing a thing with some business owners the other day, and one of them asked a question, which was like, what are the assets of my company worth? I don't have any employees, but I have a cool product. And I think the dream for a lot of entrepreneurs is to get paid wild sums of money for the product, that yet in many cases it's not as valuable without the customers buying the product, or a revenue stream, or a profit,
or the founder. Like, the amount of effort it takes today to spin up a product on the internet. Like, you've got AI tools that can code host, build, launch. Like I've built 3 or 4 apps that 5 years ago would have cost me $1 million of fundraising and hiring multiple people, and I can do it in a week. So, the value of your product, depends on the vertical, right? Like if your product is some really advanced battery technology, that's very different. But the value of your app, if you have a cool app, is very little these days. The value of your brand, your customers, your team, your ambition. Like I can't underemphasize how valuable a founder is. Like the personality of someone who is willing to do everything it takes to be a founder of a company is incredibly valuable to other companies. Having that kind of an employee, because you can't recruit them, right? Like most people found companies because they don't want a job. But if you can find someone that's excited enough to work on the thing that you're building, but take on the kind of level of commitment and ownership and, tenacity and excitement as a founder would, like that's a really powerful role to hire for. And, I've hired them before. I've been a hired version of that before. Like there's a reason companies acquire teams. And so that's a challenge when you build a business and you're going to sell it and you're like, I want to sell it and go sail off to the sunset. Like in many cases, but not all, the value of that thing is very much you and what you've built. But if you have a profitable company with revenue, the value might be the business. But in a world where software and apps are a big piece of it, I think, the value of the software is less than some people think.
Yeah, a buddy of mine calls it primal leadership. The primal being kind of like willing to tear the face off of a predator to achieve your goal is a very primal kind of animalistic, carnivorous kind of way to think about a job, but it is a very specific kind of personality type.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the Hacks is the pod, and I want to know a little more about the business model. So, how do you make money on the pod? Like, do you advertising, get people subscribe? Like, what's the economic model?
Yes, so economic model is exactly as you described. Like, we run a podcast. It's a media company. We have sponsors. We do some affiliate revenue. We've turned our success in running a podcast into a small one or two client agency where we help 1 or 2 other podcasts, monetize. So it's not a big agency, but it is something we do. And that's the business. We run a newsletter. The entire idea, and I started this whole thing out saying when I started Grove, I kind of thought it was me starting me as a company. And now everyone's like, oh, now you've started you as a company. Like before you started this thing that you love, but it wasn't all of you. Like my passion is optimizing everything. And personal finance is one of them. Traveling for free is one of them. Dialing in my health is one, my relationship, my family, my kids,
hacks
time
being
management.
cool little tricks and tips that are not well understood, but give you outsized results.
Yes, I love finding arbitrage opportunities. And so in a way, the title of All the Hacks is like undersells it because sometimes it's like a giant mindset shift that can unlock, 6 figures of revenue. Like we've definitely had people who reached out and said, I am now making, 6 figures more of revenue because of this thing I learned in this episode, which normally I would think of a hack as like not that. But it's very hard to concisely explain everything we do. And the name we have now does that really well. It's about upgrading your life, your money, your travel, your points, all that stuff.
So you got a bunch of business owners that are listening to this. Give me a hack for a business owner.
I think something that oftentimes I meet people, and it's wild to me that in their personal lives, they're like, I have dialed in. I've got, this credit card. I'm earning all these points. I travel for free. And I'm like, well, what do you do with your business? And they're like, well, we just use this like 1% cashback card for our business. Like, what are you doing? Like, I think that business spend, oftentimes, we're capped at how much we spend personally. Like, I don't know a lot of people who regularly spend 6 figures a month on their personal life. A lot of businesses spend 6 figures a month on all kinds of stuff, buying inventory, shipping costs, and, credit card rewards are something that when optimized can be really lucrative for a business. Not to mention that the credit card companies know this, which is why, an Amex personal card might give you 100,000 points to sign up, and an Amex business card might give you 300,000 points to sign up. And so the rewards on business cards are really lucrative. And, I can touch briefly on the tax side of it because there's a little nuance there.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think that, people who don't realize that their business spend can unlock a tremendous benefit in the form of rewards are probably missing out.
So what card would you go with if you had a bunch if you were in the US and you had a bunch to spend?
So the funny thing is, let's say like the easiest, simplest, best card might be the Venture X business card, right? It's a Capital One card, earns 2x points on everything. So it's a business card. It's a charge card, meaning there's no predefined limit each month. And so as you spend, that ability to spend goes up and up and up. You get 2x points on everything. You can just book travel, or you can transfer them to a ton of airline partners. And, we're using Capital One points to fly our entire family to Japan in business class next year. And, if I actually calculated the effective cashback rate based on the value of those tickets, it would probably be, like a 10x card. It's not a 2x card. However, if you were to get an Amex Business Platinum right now and spend, let's call it $30,000 on it, you would get 300,000 points as a sign-up bonus, plus probably 30 to 60,000 on the spend. So, if you're not working on a big bonus, which can be intimidating to do over and over again, sure, you're kind of missing out on some outsized opportunity. 2x points on $30,000 is 60,000 points. A 300,000 point sign-up bonus plus 60,000 points is 6 times, it's like 6 times more. So I would say it depends on the month what cards are offering these kind of really lucrative opportunities for businesses. And it's not just lucrative for businesses for spending. All the time I see business financial institutions say, hey, try our business checking account out and we're going to, deposit this much for 90 days and maybe we'll give you $5,000. Well, if every 90 days you're able to move around that money, that business might have an extra $20,000 each year, right? If you're able to open a credit card every quarter that earns you 300,000 points, I could argue that's probably worth at a minimum, $12,000 a year. So while for simplicity's sake, I could say, go get the Capital One Venture X. And by the way, if you want to support me, go to allthehacks.com, click the credit cards link and use our link there because that's one of the ways we make money. I do think that the sign-up bonus is great on it. Like that is a great one-stop shop. But if you're spending a ton of money, at least opening up a card every few months, is also lucrative. But I would say simplest answer, Capital One Venture X business, huge sign-up bonus right now. Plus 2x on everything. And, obviously you could support me using my link, but don't do it just for that. On the Amex Business Platinum side, I would say don't use my link if you can find a better one somewhere else. We don't actually have affiliate links with Amex. All of the members in our member community, we rotate through their referral links. Amex is notorious for sometimes not putting the best link offers on referral links, depending on the month. But Capital One is kind in that they don't give us links to share that earn us money that aren't just as good as all the other links. So always use the best link. If the best link's on my website, would love you to use it.
There you go.
But I think the reward side is just unlocked an ability for our family to just take incredible, incredible vacations. And, I think one nuance to that is, in my personal life, if someone says, hey, do you want to pay your tuition bill? It's going to cost an extra 3% to pay your tuition bill with your credit card. I don't know if that's worth it. On the business side, that fee is a business expense. Now we could get into the taxability of credit card rewards. They are not you're never going to get a 1099 for your credit card rewards. They're treated like a rebate. Effectively, they're like as if you got a coupon. The value of them is a little bit hard to peg down, but ask your CPA. But I would say if you're a business owner, you have the opportunity to not only put expenses that take credit cards, but there's sites like Melio and Plastique that let you pay any bills. There are companies that will let you run your entire payroll on your credit card. And a lucrative option is sometimes the points. Sometimes the lucrative option is, imagine if you could open up a 0% APR card and run a ton of transactions on it now you don't have to pay it for other than minimum payments for 15 months. That could be the most lucrative thing from your business, is like getting a 0% interest loan. So credit cards are amazing. Obviously, if you can't pay the bill off in full each month, ignore everything we said, delete it from your memory, Men in Black, hold the thing up, wipe it all out. But if you can, don't settle for a 1%, 1.5% back card, because you're just leaving money on the table.
The podcast is called All the Hacks. Chris Hutchins, thanks for doing this. Hutchins, excuse me. I'll try that again. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I think, as I said earlier, it's a really it's a great example of monetizing what you built in a kind of creative way, and I'm super grateful for you sharing with our listeners.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And to anyone looking to sell a business, I think the biggest takeaway I have is like, understand what you have and run a tight process to make it happen quickly, so that you can, and make sure that you give people an out, because otherwise they'll just waste your time.
Words of wisdom. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for having me.